RANGA the Wise. King Devanaya had only recently come to the throne. The youthful king resolved to rule his kingdom with justice for rich and poor alike. But if anything, the new king was far too trusting, and as always, there were far too many eager to take advantage of the king's generosity. Every morning the palace courtyard was crowded with beggars, and the king's servants went round carrying trays loaded with silver coin, and each beggar was handed 5 coins. Of course, most of the beggars turned up every morning, so they soon became quite affluent. They would stand and shout their praises of their monarch, and swore to make any sacrifice to help the king. But then the beggars were bad as the nobles, who, full of great schemes to enrich themselves, borrowed lavishly from the king, promising by all that was holy to repay the loans whenever the king wished. Yet there was one at court who considered that the king was extremely foolish and far too trusting. This was RANGA, the keeper of the royal treasury. RANGA was the only son of an impoverished noble family of Golconda, who had set out to make his own way in life. The king had taken an immediate liking to RANGA, and had no qualms in making him the keeper of the treasury. RANGA would often remonstrate with the king on the huge sums that had been lent to the nobles, and the cost of giving so much money to beggars, who merely came back for more. But the king laughed at RANGA's pleas, and told him that all these people were good friends, and all the loans would certainly be repaid. As time went by, the king seemed to become more and more besotted with the idea that loaning money was the firm foundation to friendship, until one morning RANGA blurted out, "It is time you realized, Your Majesty, that these so-called friends will never repay their debts." The king looked astonished at RANGA's outburst. "You misjudge my nobles," he said sternly. "I know they would gladly give me everything they possess for the asking." That night the king was holding a banquet, and during the meal turned to one of his nobles and in a jocular tone said, "My treasurer has been trying to convince me that you people will never repay the monies you have borrowed." "Your treasurer is not to be trusted," replied the noble haughtily. "Everyone here knows that scoundrel has been robbing the treasury for years." Next morning the king sent for RANGA and said, "My nobles accuse you of taking money from the treasury. Is this true?" "I admit I have been taking money," replied RANGA, "but one day I will explain why." "One will not listen to any explanation," said the king. "You are dismissed from my court. Go." A new treasurer was appointed, and things went on as before, till the day came when the treasurer with a long face went to the king and bemoaned, "Your Majesty, the treasury is empty. Even the servants cannot be paid." At first the king was horrified. Then he remembered all that was owing by the nobles, so he commanded that the nobles who were in his debt should attend the court immediately. When the nobles were assembled, the king explained that the treasury sorely needed money, so the nobles must repay what they owed. There was an immediate outcry. "I took it for granted that the money was a gift," said one of them. "I have no money," said another. And one voice shouted, "It is a scandal that your treasury is empty. You gave too much money to all the beggars." The king, sadly disillusioned, waved the nobles away, and with a heavy heart wandered out into the palace grounds, his faith shaken in mankind. Hearing a shout, the king turned to see a horseman riding towards him. Good heavens! It was RANGA, who he had dismissed for robbing the treasury. "I have heard the sorry news, Your Majesty," said RANGA, dismounting. "Now I can explain. One took large sums of money from the treasury and kept them safe in a house I built the other side of the river, knowing the day would come when you would need money. So mount this horse, and I will lead you to the wealth you never knew you possessed." The king was astonished at this change in events. "Let us both ride on this horse," he cried. "If what you say is true, you have saved my kingdom." The wise RANGA had saved part of the king's wealth from disappearing into the pockets of his grasping nobles. From that day onwards, the king was a far wiser man. With RANGA to guide him, the nobles were made to repay their debts or forfeit their lands and possessions. True loyalty is proven by actions, not words. Flattery and empty promises fade in times of trouble, but those who quietly protect your well-being are your real friends.